Welcome. Oh yeah, I see live. Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm Eliza Lynn Tobin, and I'm here today with Tanea Kohler from TPK Feng Shui. And Tanea is a Feng Shui expert and creator of the Clear Your Space, Clear Your Mind course. And she's here today to talk to us about clearing our space and cultivating a space for our creativity. So welcome, Tanea.
Thanks, Eliza. It's so good to be with you today.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I founded TPK Feng Shui and Design, and I help people create homes that they fall in love with. I kind of help them uncover the beauty in their homes, because so often people have homes that they love and that are beautiful, and oftentimes just the stuff of everyday life and kind of the accumulation that happens over the years can cover up that beauty and can make the space feel more stagnant. And so I help people with decluttering a lot. I do a lot of color consultations for people, and just really get in the course, Clear Your Space, Clear Your Mind, we get really deep into that decluttering of our physical space and how that affects our mental well-being, and how that creates a space of clarity and confidence and creativity, really. So many people that I work with are looking for that kind of creative urge, and how to create spaces in their homes that help inspire that within them. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about all of that.
Awesome. Yeah, well, and you really helped me create that space in my own home, and also particularly in my studio space, which is where I'm right now, in my garage, which I turned into my studio. And so, yeah, I was going to just ask you a couple of questions about how people at home can do that in their own spaces and create a place that they can make their art, whatever that art may be.
Great. That sounds great.
So yeah, just to start, if you have maybe a space or maybe a corner in your home that you use for your creative space, your art making or whatever it may be, if there was just one thing that you could do, that you could change in that space to make it more, to work better for you, and to kind of help it have it help you with your creativity, what would that be?
Good question. So, you know, the one thing overall in every space, but really important in a creative space, is the looking at all of the stuff that occupies it. So, you know, looking at all of the things that are in your space, because everything around you has this kind of not only energetic connection, but also you're seeing it visually. And so when you're really wanting to have a creative space, but it's full of other things, that can make it really tricky to feel like you're in a creative mindset. And I know that oftentimes people will have spaces that they want to have be, you know, their home office or their sewing room or their art room, and that space has other purposes also. So it can be you know, a guest room, or it can be a home office and you want to be able to paint in there also, or do some sort of other art form, crafting, and that can be tricky as well. So when you're in a space, no matter if it's solely, you know, designated, solely designed for creating your own artwork, which not a lot of us have a space that's designed just for that, but whether or not it's designed just for that, or if it has other uses also, it's really important to take a look at what you have in that space. And so what I encourage people to do, you know, and it takes some time, it's kind of a tricky thing. It's one thing you can do, but it's a little bit time consuming sometimes, is to really make sure that everything in that space needs to be there. So when you're looking at what you want to use for your creative means, you want to make sure that all of that stuff is really accessible, and you want to make sure that not a lot of other stuff, it feels like it's cluttering the space. So when it does have multiple purposes, that room, you know, it might also have a futon that turns into a guest bed or something like that. but try to really designate the space for you, right? Try to make it your little oasis that when you go and sit down at that chair, at that place, that you feel inspired and you feel creative. And one way to do that is to really clear out the space around you.
That's a really good suggestion. What if you are quite a collector? Like I happen to, and I think this is part of my creative process is to find things out there in the world and bring them back into my studio because I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I could use this in a project, or, I'm going to save all these cuttings from magazines because I might be able to use them at some point in my projects, and have them at my fingertips when I need them. So I have a tendency to, stuff all of my shelves and my little corners of cupboards with a lot of things that I might use for later in my projects. Do you have any suggestions in terms of, how to organize that stuff or how to sort through it and know what you want to keep for future reference or what to get rid of?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question because I feel like a lot of artists have that, not problem, but have that come up, right? They find all of these things that are really useful in their art form and they want to be able to use them. And, and I'm a photographer by trade and studied art in school also. And I have in my life very much been a collector, somebody who really likes to hold on to things. And so I feel that question very deeply and have kind of worked through that in my own space as well as with clients. But what I recommend is this. So when you're out and you're finding things that are helpful and inspiring for you, like that's fantastic. That's what you want when you're making art, right? You want those things around you that are inspiring you to draw and to paint and to use your creativity. And so it's not like you need the room to be totally sparse, right? You don't necessarily have to have a totally blank desk or a blank table to start from by any means. The criteria that I use with my clients is a criteria that Marie Kondo wrote about in her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, which I know that I've talked with you about before. And her criteria, sole criteria for whether or not to keep anything in your home, and you go through this very specific process, but the criteria is, does it inspire joy? Does it make you happy when you hold it? Does it make you happy when you think about it? And that criteria is a really powerful one because what inspires joy inside of you, it's a very personal thing, but it also is, you want to be surrounded in your space by the things that bring you joy, because the things that aren't bringing you joy are weighing you down. They're making it more difficult to be creative. They're making it more difficult to be inspired. And so in your creative space, this is really important as well. And so I would encourage people in their supplies. I know, from my perspective as an artist early on, I had, I studied a lot of different mediums. And so I had art supplies from all of these different mediums. And, I really honed in on a couple. And then I had all these fantastic art supplies that I didn't want to release. I wasn't ready to let go of. And so when I eventually did, what was helpful for me was that it was really easy for me to find someone who used them. In that there was, there are schools that can really use those supplies. There are other people that can really find joy in using those different supplies that are maybe languishing in your cupboards, in your art space. And whenever you make space, whenever you release things from your space, that's making this physical space, and it's making an energetic space, and it's allowing these new opportunities to come your way that are really in alignment with who you are today. And so whenever you create those spaces, it's really opening up the possibility for you to be creative in that space, for you to have new inspiration to come your way. So, when you have stuff that's kind of stockpiled away in different, drawers and closets in your art space or in other places, I definitely recommend that you go through those. And, it's easier when you do it by different categories. Like, these are all my painting supplies and what brings me joy and what doesn't bring me joy. And so I definitely recommend trying to surround yourself only by the things that bring you joy. And that is a process that takes a little bit of time. So it's not something that you can immediately do, but on your surface itself where you're working, I really recommend that that is relatively clean and has out only the things that are inspiring you that day or inspiring you that week, whenever it is, so that when you have your creative space set up, it's not like all of those things are cluttering your desk. You know, it's like they're packed away in the drawers. It's not necessarily ideal, but it's better than having them up on the surface.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's such a good idea. I was just thinking, like, I'm kind of a pen collector. Like, I have a thing for different types of pens and ink, like inky pens and Sharpies and all that kind of thing. And I went, through this process at your suggestion of kind of cooling out the things that I don't really need anymore or don't want. And I had like a garbage bag full of pens that didn't even work, that were just kind of in the way and cluttering up the rest of my pens. And now I actually, when I need a pen, I know the ones that I have and I know where they are, and I can find them really quickly and get to, the actual act of creating a lot quicker because of that. So yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Really helpful.
Yeah, I find it so interesting how often we have things like that around, like dozens of pens or other broken things in our space, or things that don't actually write and don't actually work. And that happens to everybody. That happens to all of us. But when you really get into your stuff, it may amaze you how many of those things that you have that aren't functional even. And that's kind of what we're filling up our space with, for lots of reasons. Like, people have, I'm curious, so when you went through the process, did you have, was it hard for you to let go of some things?
The dead pens were pretty easy. Though it was a good place to start, really, because it was like, okay, I know this is not a problem. I can get rid of this because it's just, I know that it's not useful to me. And there were definitely some harder things to get rid of. I think, in particular, things like I had a box full of kind of old pieces of paper and like bits of letters and I don't know, ephemeria, is that what you call it? I don't know. It's just like bits of stuff that I was collecting that I kind of felt like I might use someday in a collage or in some way it would inspire me. And I had a whole box of stuff like this, and it was like old cards that people had sent me and stuff like that. And that was a little trickier to get rid of, simply because I had an attachment to it. I felt like I was holding on to it for some reason. But the interesting thing is that I've gotten rid of that stuff now, and I don't miss it. I actually don't even remember what it was. I just know that I had a box full of like papery, like, stuff that I had collected over the years. And I think that having not missed it, I now have more space for kind of collecting new things, I guess, but kind of more current things, things that are, like you said, like actually inspiring me right in this moment, colors that I find from, different magazine bits or whatever it is that I've cut out and collected, but they're more current to me. And so I have more of a immediate experience with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and really, you hit the nail right on the head there, because for so many people, the experience of releasing things brings up these kind of fears and anxieties. And very often the first thing that comes up is the like, I'm going to need that when, or I might need that if. And that happens to 99% of people that I work with and myself when I go through the process. And so when you're thinking that, it's a fear-based statement, right? It's this statement that says, I'm not going to have what I need in the future, so I need this because I'm going to need it then. Mm-hmm. And so it's saying that you won't feel supported in the future whenever we hold on to those things because we might need them when. And that is, I was a collector by nature, and also, I think my parents were both collectors, and so I had all of those those things that I would collect, and you do get these sentimental attachments to them, and those are the trickiest things to get rid of. That's, what we visit last in our course, the things that have sentimental attachment, because those are the trickiest, and you want to have a lot of practice before you get to those things. But The idea that you'll need something in the future that you haven't used for 5 years, it's not really a rational thought. It's an emotional attachment. But when I talk to people about how it's saying to your future self, I won't be supported in the future, it's kind of like patting yourself now so that you'll be supported in the future. It's kind of ironic because it's really putting you in a place where you're attracting those energies of not being supported and saying, I won't be supported in the future, so I need all of these things to have with me so that I'll have everything that I need. So it's kind of a tricky kind of catch-22.
Yeah. But then when I did let go of some of that stuff, like I said, I don't miss it. I don't even really remember what was in it. I just knew I had it and that it was something I carried around with me literally from every single place that I moved. And that letting go of it, I don't know that it's not here.
Yeah. And
that's space for new things. And that's really cool.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point, because most of the time when you do release something that's been hard to release, it's enlightening, right? You feel like this weight is lifted and you have more physical space and it's energizing. So the end result of it is always worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then speaking of physical space, the other thing that you really kind of helped me with, and it was a very small, pretty easy change that I made in my space, but made a huge difference, was actually moving where I worked. Before, I had my desk kind of pushed up against the wall, and as I was sitting there, I had this huge cupboard kind of hanging on the wall above my head, and as I was sitting there, like I couldn't really see out the window. I couldn't really see out the door. I was kind of, and I'd get like, kind of stuck under there. And you suggested to move my desk over, I think it was to move it over to the corner to put it into the commanding position. So I'm wondering if you could just talk about what that is a little bit and how that can help.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great way to make a big difference without like spending a lot of money and without having to go through all of your things. And the commanding position basically means that, so from where you sit, you have command of all of the space in front of you, right? You can see what's going on. You're not going to be surprised by anything that comes your way. And then all this stuff that's going on behind you is stuff that is going to kind of trigger your subconscious mind, sometimes your conscious mind, but often it's your subconscious mind that's saying, what's going on back there? Should I be worried? Should I be surprised? And so the idea is that wherever you are in your home and where you really want to be able to fully relax or really focus, you want to be in the commanding position. So that definitely applies to your desk or your workspace, any workspace really. So that means that from where you sit, you want to be able to see the door into the room, the main door into the room, and you don't want to be in the path of the door. So you don't want to be like right in front of the door, because all of that energy from the door opening and coming in is really active energy and doesn't really allow you to really settle into your work. And so the commanding position is just a place where you can see the door and you're really comfortable working where you are. So often I work with people, I would say that 90% of the people that I work with have a desk, like even just for a workspace, not necessarily a creative space, but work is also creative, and have a desk that is pushed up against the wall, and often their back is to the door. And, in an office place, that's also really, really common. But it's really helpful, like you said, it kind of changes the dynamic. All of a sudden, how you feel in your space is much more open and much more in control and much more at ease. So you don't have these little distractors going on that, I think that we've all had the experience of sitting at our desk and really being distracted by lots of things that we could do that are not the work we're doing right now, not the work we want to be doing right now. And that it's so much easier for that to happen when you have your back to the door or when you're not really fully in control of your space. or when your desk is kind of cluttered with stuff. So there's like two things that can really pull your attention in other ways. But being in the commanding position is a great way to really change the dynamic in your space. And often it means that, you know, often I'll work with people who have their desk right up against the wall because it's under a window and they want to be able to see out the window, right? And so that's important. Like, it's important to have that connection to nature. For so many of us, it's important for that light to be able to come in. But so often you can actually switch it up a little bit. Like, you can put your desk, one end of your desk up against the wall where the window is, so that where you sit, you still see outside, but you can also see the door. So, you know, every room is different, but whenever you can put yourself in that commanding position, it's going to be so much easier to have really kind of inspired work happen, really focused work happen in that place.
Yeah, and I found that to be very true, just in terms of, I shifted, moved my desk, and it was like, it opened up all kinds of energy in the room that really have helped me become, I've created a lot more momentum in my creativity, in my painting and art making practice since I made that transition. So that's
good. That's awesome. I love hearing it.
Kind of, I guess to recap the sort of the, one thing you said was to surround yourself with things you love, clear out the things that aren't useful or helpful to you anymore, and to even just make a small change, like moving your desk so that it's in a more optimal position. Is there anything else that you'd want to add to that you can, that can really help optimize somebody's creativity in their space?
One thing to look at is what you see when you look up from that space. So when you're sitting at your desk and you're working and you look up, what do you see? Like, is it inspiring you? Is it something that you love? Again, you not only want to love like the stuff around you, surround yourself by stuff that you love, but also you want to love the paint color on the wall, right? You want to love the colors around you. You want it to feel like you. And so, that's also an easy way to shift things up, just by like putting a different piece of artwork that really resonates for you, or painting that wall a color that you love that just makes you feel inspired. That can be a really helpful way to shift your space and how you work in your space in a relatively easy way to do that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, then one last question that I had. This one is actually from my girl Holly, so it's a shout out to her. And she wants to know, how do you know when you've got your feng shui in the right place? Like, how it's working?
Question, Holly. Okay, so how do you know? Okay, so feng shui is all about really feeling into your intuition and paying attention to that. Just like you're feeling into your joy and what that feels like, you also just really want to pay attention to how you feel in a space. So you know that you've arrived when you go into your space and it feels right. So when you walk into your space and you think, oh, I want to move my desk, or that chair doesn't belong there, or I really wish I could see out the window, then those are intuitions that you should listen to. Those are important, and they're telling you to make these little shifts. And so becoming aware of those things. Sometimes they're so in the subconscious because lives are busy and our homes are full. And the more you clear out your stuff, the more able you are to really pay attention to those thoughts and be aware of them. And sometimes I like to write them down even, or just really give them the space that they deserve, because intuition is like this sixth sense that when you practice it and when you use it, it becomes stronger and clearer. It's just like any sense. If you never use your eyes, when you opened your eyes, you wouldn't be able to use them very well. And your intuition is the same way. So really listen into that intuition. And there are obviously some specific things that you want to do in your space. And I've created a tip sheet for you all for creating space for your creativity. So you can click below this and get access to that as well. That'll have some specific suggestions. But what I recommend is just really listening into your intuition, because you'll know when your space feels right. And then you can make these little shifts with the help of the tip sheet or with the help of your intuition that really gets you to a place where it feels better.
Awesome. Awesome. I can't wait to check that out. Well, thank you so much, Shanae. It was great talking with you today, and come back again anytime.
All right. Thanks, Eliza. It was really fun.
Bye.
Really fun talking to you.
Here's my little Nomi.